Hi, this is Animation Station. My name is Teosha Charles and my co-host Joseph.
Hello, Tiasha. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm all right, and thank you to our wonderful listeners for stopping by the animation station.
Yes, thank you guys so much, and we have a wonderful episode for you guys today.
Hmm.
We are going to be talking about any cartoon or anime that has to influence gaming or have made a game out of it.
Hmm. Yeah. Normally, we always talk about episodes and shows and stuff like that on this episode. But one thing that's been happening a lot is that a lot of these cartoons or anime episodes have influenced people to either make them about games or just make a video game based off of them. Now, normally we would talk about the shows, but we're just talking strictly video games here. Video games that have been inspired or based off of a particular anime or cartoon.
That's right. And I have to say, if they a lot of people made a lot of video games off of cartoons. Or
Hmm.
sometimes made a cartoon out of the video game.
Hmm.
Childhood, man.
Yeah. But specifically talking about video games, which is something that you and I both spend a lot of time talking about. We almost we almost would have segments about just separately video games, but talking about the cartoons and anime was more or less what we wanted for this podcast. But we're taking a break from that a little bit, even though we're still sticking to the cartoons and anime, but shifting just a little bit and to talk about video games.
That's right. That's the first.
Hmm.
But let's see. I think we'll mix it up a little bit, just like we're mixing it up now. I think
Hmm.
you should start first.
Okay. Yeah, give you some time to get your stuff together. Okay. So the first one I want to start off with tonight is something that really was probably the first cartoon video game that I ever played. And talking about this franchise as a whole, we've brought it up briefly, but I want to talk about the South Park video game franchise. And the very first video game, it's 20 years old now, is South Park. The very first video game came out in 1998, and it was for PlayStation. So this is taking it back just a little bit. And I remember it because South Park has always been a huge part of my life. Not so much as it has been in the past couple of years, but I remember like when it first came out, how popular it was, and when it made its first big video game. Now, the first video game that it came out with was a first-person shooter, and it was very heavily influenced by GoldenEye, which was, as most people know from for N64, it was pretty popular. But making this first game a first-person shooter, you had all these crazy weapons from like the typical dodgeball with like a Nerf dart gun, and then these crazy wild like science sci-fi games that they had with like the plasma laser or some kind of grenade launcher. I even remember
Nice.
them having these Terrence and Phillip dolls that kind of worked like grenades, where they were more like stink bombs.
What?
Yeah, like they would have the Terrence and Phillip rag dolls, and you would throw them, and they would just explode, and they, you would just see like this
Wow.
big giant like fart bomb, and then it would just create like this area of effect, this AOE effect, and it would just like kill anything that was coming your way. But the cool things about some of them, the weapons, they were kind of creative, kind of gave influence to later franchises that came a little bit down the road. Like they had a couple other games in the 90s and the early 2000s, but they weren't really as popular. But the ones that really came along that I've played a couple years ago was the Stick of Truth, the South Park video game Stick of Truth, and then
Oh
eventually
my
given
god.
way to the sequel in 2017, which wasn't too long ago, was the Fractured But Whole version of it. And I wanted to kind of briefly talk about these three games in general because I feel like these three are definitely by far the most popular. Like they had a couple others in the early 2000s and stuff, but and they're kind of I think maybe they came up with like a couple mobile games, but nowhere near as popular. And I really like the Stick of Truth a lot more than I like their sequel, The Fractured, because the first one was an RPG game. It was a third person, kind of like a side scroller almost, and it was strictly fantasy based. Like the story of the plot was is that they're playing an RPG, but the kids are playing like the Dungeons and Dragons, and it's fantasy based. But it's kind of cool because they kind of have these little Easter eggs that are homage to the older games, since it's the same creators, Trey
Right.
Parker, them. Um, but then the fractured one is the superheroes, which is it's kind of like the same thing as the first game. They kind of just slap a different, you know, color on it, which is just the superheroes. Even though it is different, but there's a lot of, they improved upon like the game mechanics and graphics and story and so on and so forth, like they do with most sequel games. But it
Right.
was still kind of the same. But the one thing I really like so much is how creative they did with the armor and the weapons, because usually they didn't go like all crazy with like the the weapons, save for like a select few, but they kept it pretty grounded. Because I remember in the playing the first game, the very first South Park video game, one good example is the dodgeball. And with this being a first person, you just kind of throw the dodgeball. But one thing that was kind of cool about it at that time was that the dodgeball, keeping to those mechanics, is that the dodgeball would bounce. So if you could like throw it at a wall and it would bounce back and hit like whatever thing that you're killing. Most of the time, like the enemies were very simple. Like it was just the turkeys. You remember the killer turkeys from like the very first Thanksgiving episode?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. So there was always those. I remember them being like one of the main enemies, as well as like the aliens. And that's when you would get like the sci-fi guns, because the aliens would be there and they would have like these plasma rifles. So you would kill
Right.
them, pick them up. Uh, and also playing like it was still it was still 3D, but being a first person shooter, it gave them an opportunity to map out the the town. And they went even more in depth with the Stick of Truth and the Fractured one later on, because you literally go around the whole town and you kind of see how everything's mapped out and kind of walk around and stuff. So that was pretty cool, especially in the 90s playing the first game.
Man. The number one thing that I love about, well, the South Park games period is that
Hmm.
they tried so hard to make sure that, a, yeah, I've seen that in that one episode, or they try to like mix it in to see, oh, you also put like little tiny hints to see, oh, that's right, I saw it in that one game. They
Hmm.
will try to mix in so much different stuff and also give you hints on what the next episode's gonna be. So you'd be
Hmm.
like, oh, that's right, they talked about this and that. It's like super clever,
Yeah, yeah,
but it's amazing and I love it. And I played the Stick of Truth and it's really, really fun.
yeah. It's definitely a really fun game. It's a good game. Just the mechanics. I mean, it's a turn-based RPG, so anybody who's ever played, the Final Fantasy franchises is a good example. You have these turn-based RPGs where the one player you kind of take turns. You go back and forth like
Right.
checkers or chess, where one person attacks you, then you attack them, and so on and so forth. So you kind of have to strategize a little bit and try and wear them down. But and the story's kind of ridiculous, but the storylines
Yes.
kind of follow. They take reference from the shows that they've already written, because and that was one thing that was really good with the newer games, is that they looked exactly like from the show, with it being a cartoon. They did a really, really good job. Not just the cutscenes, but the actual in-game footage looks very much like the show, like the animations and stuff. Like, I mean, they're very simple to begin with, but I
Right.
mean, they were able to keep it very relatable to the show. And with some of like the weapons and the body armor, like it's all like real life stuff. Like none of it is like crazy, you
Right.
know, like something sci-fi or something ridiculous. Like there's a little bit of it, but a lot of the inventory that you get is the things that the kids you would find them having in the show. Like one of them's like football, uh, a helmet or shoulder pads or
Or
something.
firecrackers.
Yeah, like one of the weapons would be a firecracker or you know, a shuriken or something, you know,
But you
something
know
that
what
they
this
would find.
reminds me of though? This
Mm.
like their weapons kind of remind me of the kids next door weapons. Like it's literally
Yeah.
random stuff that kids will put together and make
Hmm.
it into something. And that's
Yeah.
what kind of reminds me of.
Like I remember there was like a plunger and like, you know, like a baseball on a string that they would just like twirl and like throw. And just like, and then you would have the typical ones like a baseball bat, crowbar, you know, a lead pipe that they would use for their weapons. But it's kind of hilarious because one thing that I love so much about the story is how in the superhero and the fantasy based ones is that the kids the way how much they play along, because those are my favorite episodes. Like those episodes span across a couple, you know, it's not just one episode. They kind of it's like a three-part storyline, and it was just
Right.
hilarious to me how the kids keep it up and play. And the stick of truth is something how they have it is like, oh, it's just a stick. Like nobody cares, but
Right.
it's some like literally the stick of truth. It's literally a stick. They went out to the backyard and they're like, hey, this is it, you know, and it's just being fun and make believe. So even though a lot of the Trey Parker and Matt Stone, the creators of South Park, they talk about a lot of real life issues, but they still find time to make fun and crack jokes and make it like something that you will used to do as a kid, especially like 90s kids or 80s kids who, you know, you just made do with what you had
Right.
and just being playing make believe. It's kind of like I know it's kind of weird to talk about it, but it reminds me so much of like the LARPing um, academic or pandemic, how, you know, live action role playing came along and it was just like, well, this is what we used to do when we were kids. It's like, and we just wanted to do it because it's fun. But that's kind of what it reminds me of, especially the stick of truth since it's fantasy based and how Cartman's a wizard, which is like the most dumbest thing. But I can see it because Cartman's behavior is just like so like he has to be like at the top. He has to be like the most important one
It
person. So
has to
like
be.
yeah, and then of course him and Kyle are at odds as always. They always hate each other, but yeah, they're on opposite sides because they can't work together.
Right. But you know what I noticed though? I noticed that no matter what, they can literally just be playing in the sand. Like
Mm,
they can literally just make a sand castles and all of a sudden they're fighting a freaking armada. Like
yeah,
it's like you guys are just playing the game and all of a sudden you're fighting real aliens or real monsters.
yeah. At the
It's
end,
like
yeah,
what the heck is this?
yeah, which is something that you know they takes, which is a callback to the very first season. Like that was their first episode. Cartman gets a probe, and you know, like it has to be in the video game because that's what started them. That was their pilot,
Right.
and very much so like in their first video game, the very first South Park. There was a lot of limitations, obviously, because it was released in '98, and you know it was a first person shooter, and they didn't have like a whole lot of enemies. Like honestly, it was just like the turkeys and the aliens that I can remember. Like I don't even remember too much of what else it was, but with them being like such them kind of keeping that friendship thing that they always have with the four boys is that yes, you can pick who you want to start as, but you couldn't really go anywhere or complete anything until like you go around and you collect everybody.
Right.
So like your first objective in like every level is to like, oh, you have to gather everyone up. You have to find the other three boys regardless of who you chose, and then you can start moving forward. And then you just get to cycle between them and fight as whoever you want. And the audio was pretty bad, but it was always like the same. It was always like the same couple of clips I think that they had from the show. So like when you cycle through the characters and you decide who you want to play, it's always like three lines that they had, and they were like clearly from the show. But it
Right.
was still entertaining. But this other stuff now, what it became later on, it was just so many references and so many Easter eggs to the season. Because the first one, Stick of Truth 2004, which is in 2014, excuse me, it's been 5 years. So they've had a lot of content since then, but still there was just so much uh, Easter eggs and references to previous seasons that you can find in the game.
Princess
Like
Kenny.
yeah, Princess Kenny, which is like the ridiculous thing. Like no one
Oh
ever
my
really,
god.
no one understood. And like there's like a twist at the end with Kenny being a princess, and she's like all those other things. It's just so weird. But like the way they fit everything from like I'm pretty sure there's like someone who keeps track of it all, like all their references and all
Oh, they
their
have to.
yeah, because so much of it like gets included or comes back up in later seasons.
Well, not just that, but there's people that actually keeps track of it too, and so
Mhm.
they'd be like you, if you even mess up just a bit, you have that fan in the background that'll be like,
Well, I
that
mean, yeah,
doesn't
the
make
fan base is
sense.
one thing. Yeah, the fan base is one thing, and nothing in their stuff makes sense. I don't think that's the point of it all. But yeah, I was much like how World of Warcraft has their lore historians, like that's their job, and they work at the company and they just keep track of all the lore. There's probably people who work for South Park that their whole thing is to keep track of all their references because there's probably like copy infringement stuff that they get. But we're getting off track here. But those are two really good video games that I really like. Mostly because like I was such a fan of South Park, and the first video game that they made in '98 was something that I really enjoyed, even though it was more like a first-person shooter, similar to GoldenEye. It was still a really neat thing, and they did kind of like the best they could
Right.
to kind of match it. But definitely the Stick of Truth, as well as the Fractured But Whole sequel that came after it. Like, if you're fans of the show, like I highly recommend it. Or just looking for a good, fun RPG game. Like the mechanics are great. Like usually, like that was something that a lot of people were really worried about because they're like, "Oh, yeah, they made it look like the game and stuff. Like that's pretty neat." But like, what's the actual gameplay? Like, is it worth playing? How's the gameplay mechanics and like the actual game function of it? And it's really
Right.
good. Like it's a really good game, and just the bonus on top of it is how much it actually looks like the show. And anyone who's a fan of it will see like all the little references and Easter eggs in it that made it so popular in the first place.
Yeah, the show and the games are just freaking perfect. It lines up
Yeah.
with everything that they've
Yeah,
done.
and it's just hilarious because there's this one scene where like so you have to make alliances
Yeah.
to like fight like in your army or whatever.
Mhm.
And because like you're the new kid in town. So you get to create your own avatar.
Yeah, and your name is New Kid.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well,
Until later.
that's what they call you. Yeah, that's what they call you. They call you new kid and all this other stuff. That's the scripted dialogue.
I was
And,
so mad because like later in the freaking game, we
mm,
couldn't like we're thinking, oh yeah, we're gonna change our name. Oh, you're a douchebag? You want to be called douchebag? I'm like, no, I'm
yeah,
clicking no.
Because it's Cartman. Yeah, he
Oh,
just
you're a
keeps calling you
douchebag.
that.
I'm like,
Yeah,
you. Oh my god.
yeah. He just calls you Sir, Lord, and like King or something like that. Like
Yeah.
it's just a bunch of craziness. But it's pretty hilarious because this is where the other stuff comes in, where they're like, "Oh, you have to get alliances. You have to make a line. We have to grow our army to like do this because like the boys are fighting each other."
Yeah.
And so it's like, "Oh, you have to go and get the girls," and so you have to like do favors for the girls, and the girls like
Yeah.
have their sunshine court or whatever, and
It
then
was
you have
so pointless.
yeah, yeah, but it's still funny because it just drives the story, and it just all it is just references to the previous seasons, and then you have
Sure.
to like go and get the goth kids, and then like
Yes.
and then you have to do them favors, and then they're like
So
walking through the
goth. So
yeah,
goth.
yeah, and you get to have like your party and stuff like that. So it's hilarious, but and it's kind of like the same thing with the fractured, where you have to like find your superpowers or make deals with like other superheroes and stuff. But
I
yeah,
keep
it's
thinking about the cousin Kyle. What's his name? Kyle's cousin. Who?
the one who's General Disarray or whatever for
Yeah.
I don't remember his name, but I just remember him as General Disarray or
Yeah.
Butters henchman.
Yeah. um. But yeah, the show, the game,
Hmm.
perfect. And then they have the one game that has to do with your phone. I forgot what it's called, but it's like a cowboy versus alien type thing where you have to use your phone as your weapon or whatever.
Oh yeah, yeah, Phone Destroyer.
Yeah, and then like it's
Yeah.
funny because Carmen actually looks like he's calling you, and I was like, oh, that's cool. I like how
Hmm.
they did that.
Yeah.
And they got another one too.
Hmm. Let's switch things up a little bit. Let's talk about one of your picks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, my pick goes back from 2011 and also 2013, and
Mhm.
it's called Cartoon Network Punch Time Explosion. And it's basically a cross. Sorry, it's a ooh, sorry, it's a crossover game where you have all different types of cartoons. That I'm talking about Ben 10, Powerpuff Girls, Dexter's Laboratory, all of them literally in the game fighting other cartoon characters. But the storyline is basically, about their worlds getting destroyed and Ben or whoever you play with as your main character goes to each different world to help out all the cartoon characters. Now, mind you, there are different evil villains and of course in the game, but of course they don't know that they're being fooled. They don't know that their worlds are going to be destroyed too. But it's like this one main evil character who wants to destroy all of Cartoon Network. And so all the heroes from every cartoon you ever watched back then, all the villains, like Father from Kids Next Door, um, Aku from Samurai Jack, like everyone works together to fight that one evil guy that wants to destroy Cartoon Network, and it's
Hmm.
the most amazing thing ever. This game came out in 2011, and the main um, platforms that it has was Wii, Nintendo 3DS, PlayStation 3, and Xbox 360. I had it on Xbox 360, and it
Hmm.
was amazing. I think it was good. And apparently it was good because they came back in 2013 with Cartoon Network Punch Time Explosion XL, which was more characters. The villain came back, and you were able to actually do multiplayer. And I was like, oh my God, yes. And I'm talking about online multiplayer. And I was like, yes. So you was able to do a whole bunch of stuff. It was Chowder from, Chowder. You had Blue and Max from um, Foster's Imaginary Friends. You had every single character you could probably think of. But it is amazing, and I really recommend it.
Hmm. Oh, you'd probably have to like download it. I doubt you would probably even find it in the store anymore. I mean, well, I mean, it's for PS3, so you probably won't even find it. I mean, maybe like on the marketplace or something, because like they don't even really sell. I
Oh,
mean,
yes, they do.
they don't do they? I don't
It's
know.
on Amazon.
I know, but I'm saying like you won't really like find them in stores or anything like that anymore.
Oh, no, no,
Like
no.
like you don't find PS3 games in stores anymore. I mean,
Oh, wait,
you
hold
don't even have
on.
stores
GameStop.
anymore.
GameStop. I
Mm.
just saw it.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's surprising.
but it's on Nintendo Wii, so
Oh, okay.
can't have it on any other platform apparently.
Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't. I mean, yeah, because you wouldn't find it for PlayStation 3 or
Nope.
360. Like they don't. Like there's not even. They don't even make them games for them anymore. So they're pretty much out.
But man, this game perfect.
Mm.
Because it's crossover. We have
Yeah.
different, like, a lot of people want some of these cartoons to mix into another cartoon, actually just crossover and be like, oh, hey, because Nickelodeon did it a lot. Nickelodeon did a whole bunch of cartoons, shows, and also games where they cross over a lot of the cartoons and let them meet each other.
Mm-hmm.
Like, same thing with Disney Channel, but just actually seeing this, it actually work is the best.
Yeah.
It's the best thing ever. I love this
Mm.
game so much.
Well, what type of I'm looking at it right now. Like, what would you say is the type of gameplay? Like, is it more like a typical 2D scroller, like the old Mortal Kombat arcade, or more like the three-dimensional where you can
Well,
circle
it's
around
a
the ring?
it's more like a Mortal Kombat screenplay, like, well, not screenplay, but like Mortal Kombat gameplay, where
Mm-hmm.
you're just going like side to side,
Okay, yeah.
and
So.
then the storyline. It has two parts. It has the 2D slideshow, and then it has the 3D slideshow when they talk about the story.
Mm-hmm.
But it's weird because sometimes it turns over, like mm, in the first one, which is the punch time explosion one. It's like a little bit of a 3D, and then XL, which is the second one, it's like a mixture of both, and it gets like a little bit much better. Like, it gets way better than XL. I would say if I
Mm-hmm.
had to choose, I would have to pick XL, just because it was more characters, um, better. I would say better weapons and better moves, but either way, the game's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect fighting game if you ever want to literally go back in time to where you used to watch all these awesome shows. You would definitely get this. This is perfect.
Mm. What would you say
But
is like one of your favorite characters to play as?
oh my god, the Powerpuff Girls.
Mm.
That if you played as, well, actually, okay. When you played the Powerpuff Girls, you had three, of course, three different selections. I would play more as Buttercup, because as Buttercup, you're able to actually fight. I wouldn't say better, but you're able to actually, like, because Buttercup's like the most strongest Powerpuff Girl in the group, and if
Mm-hmm.
you used her first, you were able to basically beat down the bad guy or whoever much quicker. And then if she doesn't work, then it switches to either Blossom or Bubbles. You was able to actually choose which one went first.
Mm. Okay.
Yeah, but I would have to say the Powerpuff Girls down pat. Like, just, you can't choose nobody else.
Mm-hmm. Did they have like super moves or something like that, or?
Yes, yes, that's an XL.
Mm.
That was an XL, and it's good.
Mm.
XL was perfect, and a better storyline. I have to say, it was actually a little bit better than the first one.
Hmm.
Well, my opinion.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
But the number one thing about XL is the voice acting, because I know one of they had to change the voice actor for Ben 10, which, by the way, I'm not talking about the young Ben 10. I'm talking about the Ben 10 when he's a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
let's yeah, I know a lot of people don't like the teenage Ben 10, but if you do, that voice actor had to get switched because of something, I don't know. But it wasn't that good to me. Like, his voice acting wasn't that good to me. I mean, for other people it was good, but I don't know. You can tell it's not really the real guy. For everybody else, it was the real person.
Mm-hmm.
But either way, best game ever.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the thing. In 2011, slowly, like step by step, you started to see Cartoon Network favorite awesome shows disappearing. So when you see this game, You're like, oh my gosh, my shows that I used to watch are back and they're fighting, and you get to actually see them fight with great moves, super moves, like special abilities to where you're getting to beat the heck out of the bad guy. It's perfect. It's like
Mm-hmm.
a blast from the past.
Mm. Yeah, because usually it's like with ratings with some of the Cartoon Networks, really. Like some shows, just aren't pulling as much as they used to. So,
Right.
or just the network in general.
Man. Like, okay, like a lot of people that I see on the internet, they have this picture where back then they had all the Cartoon Network characters from different shows sitting in a theater, a movie theater. And
Mm-hmm.
they also did it for, the cartoons now, like Gumball and Teen Titans Go and stuff like that. And you see all those empty seats, and then you only see like freaking five or six, or heck, even like 10 people sitting in those seats,
Mm-hmm.
and everything else is empty. You're like, oh my god, my cartoons from back in the day, and then look at it now.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, yeah, because it's just what's popular, and it's a ratings game for a lot of it. And also with some of the actors, I mean, you look at some of those actors from those older shows. Some of them are in the new shows now, and that's what they're doing. So, I mean, they're people move on from doing projects, new shows,
Not
and
the same.
it's just reruns. It's just reruns. That's all it is. And then eventually those reruns get pushed to like 3 in the morning because that's when all those people are up who watch those kinds of shows because they're not doing nothing much else. But
Right.
uh, and then they stop pulling traction, and some of them do play. They just get like a smaller time slot where no one's up. They're just like in the middle of the night or something, or early in the morning.
Man, I miss all that.
Hmm.
I miss them all. It's weird though because they're thinking of bringing it all back, like when it comes to like the video, like actually bringing them back when it comes to video games and also TV shows. But I just hope they know that they're not helping it; they're more like hurting
Hmm.
it. Because okay, like for example, I know it's off topic, but Samurai Jack,
Hmm.
which by the way they took that to Adult Swim, which I think it was a smart move. But they don't. A lot of people don't know the actual real reason of that. The reason why they went to Adult Swim is because the vice president of Cartoon Network didn't think it was appropriate for kids,
Hmm.
which is understandable. But they said they can take out the blood and stuff like that. They can take it out. They were actually agreeing with her. No, don't want it. Okay. So when Adult Swim side of Cartoon Network wanted to look at it, they freaking loved it. And by the time they already signed the contract and everything, she wanted it back to regular Cartoon Network, and they were like, no. Oh no,
Hmm.
Adult Swim already gave us our money and everything else. We're good. We don't want to come back. And
Yeah.
it was perfect.
Yeah.
Samurai
Well,
Jack was perfect coming
yeah.
back.
Well, Adult Swim's got a lot more freedoms than Cartoon Network. I mean, most people assume Cartoon Network with a certain type of image, where Adult Swim, it's in the name. So.
Well, the image now, back then you were able to see blood and bones popping out and big old like bruises that look like boils, like that type of stuff. That's the stuff I miss and love. But of course now it's way different now. My poor cartoon. What do they do to you?
Mm.
But bottom line, this game brings back memories, and I freaking love it. The best part is when you're like when you hit the other person out of the so-called ring or whatever. You actually, some of them actually fly closer, like close to you, and like slide down like they're hitting your screen, and I freaking
Mm.
love it. But yeah, this game I really recommend. I really recommend Cartoon Network. Basically any Cartoon Network game, but this right here is the best. Cartoon Network Punch Time Explosion, and also Excel. Perfect.
Mm, okay.
That's right.
Mm. So
Wow.
switching things up a little bit. I know we don't really, since we did two American ones, I'm gonna briefly talk about anime because we have to keep it original a little bit. Don't want to mix up things too much. Needs to mention at least one anime, but one franchise that it's been pretty popular and has over 7 video games based off its anime manga franchise is that of Sword Art Online. Now, I've only played like one of the 7 games, considering like a couple of them, or a good majority of them, are only available in Japan. Uh, some of them, and also pretty much only for like the PlayStation as well, because they're only within Japan. And the PlayStation Vita, some of those games, as well as the PSP and the actual PlayStation console, for some of the games, because the PlayStation Vita is still, even though it's not very popular here in the States anymore, and they stopped manufacturing them for the States, which is kind of sad, but understandable. The PSP and the Vita are still very popular in Japan for
Really?
mobile console. Yeah, yeah. I mean, people use them a lot, and they're kind of like always on the go, and the way their transportation works, a lot of trains and a lot of public transportation, so there's always like a ton of people playing on the console, or excuse me, on their portables, rather than their cell phones. So it's still very popular, the PSP. And pretty much all the games that have been made for the Sword Art Online are available for the PlayStation Vita and the PSP.
Mm.
But the only one that I really played was the Hollow Realization. It was the fourth game, and it was a lot of fun. It didn't really come out till like a few months later after it was released in Japan, so I got to like actually see the reviews. But by the time they got it translated, it was in 2016 when I first started playing it, and it was a lot of fun. It was something that kind of was like a throwback to the franchise because I enjoyed playing it, and to actually kind of take. And this is a anime that's based off a video game. Like the whole franchise is based off of this virtual reality video game type concept. So seeing things from the show get implemented into a video game, because it's kind of weird. It's all like, why doesn't someone like make this video game? Because the whole show is strictly like they live inside a video game, or
Right.
that's part of the show, is them diving into this virtual reality virtual video game. So it's just like all the mechanics are kind of there, because they have like the way they have their stats and abilities. It's like, yeah, those are video game concepts. So like, why doesn't someone just make this? And eventually they did. But one thing that's kind of cool is that for the longest, it kind of filled the gaps, because there was this huge gap between like the first and second season, even now the third season that just wrapped not too long ago. But there was like years in between the seasons, and these video games kind of filled that void with giving people things to play, and because they would be wanting the anime, but they're like, here, take this game, this will satisfy your your quenching need to watch this stuff. But a lot of it though is from taken from the franchise, or some of the storylines are ones that, and the characters that get put into the video games are some characters that they either made up that are non-canon from the show, or some of them are, and it kind of gives it this extra content to fill in the world that they couldn't fit into the cartoon, or into the anime, excuse me.
Right.
But that was the only one that I ever played, the Hollow Realization. There's been a ton of others, all of them based off of the different worlds that are in the show. But some of them are only in Japan. But the last one they released I think was, you know what? I really don't know. It was one that they just released not too long ago.
Oh.
I think it was last year when it was released because I remember seeing it on Steam uh, for for PC and for PS4. And I think,
Nice.
and then finally the last one, yeah, the latest one I think was for Fatal Bullet, if I remember correctly. And that one was actually for Xbox One, which I was surprised considering that it was like the first one that I ever saw for Xbox when all the other ones have been exclusive for PlayStation or PC.
Are any of them like multiplayer or anything like that?
You know
Or
the
online multiplayer?
the Hollow Realization one, I don't think it was. I didn't really play it all that much. I only played like the main storyline. But
Okay.
that one was single player.
Okay.
I think maybe some of the other ones they might have like maybe some kind of like fighting type one, but I don't think so. Maybe like some kind of like arena basis type thing. But you know what? I really don't think so. I think most of them just stick to like the single player storylines, so similar to something like Final Fantasy, where they just have like just the RPG single player.
Hmm.
They do have mobile games.
Oh, they do.
Yeah, they do have a lot of mobile games. So probably some of that aspect. I don't think it would be strictly single player, like a storyline base. Maybe it might be something else, but it's just related to the franchise in some way.
Interesting.
But a lot of them, again, a lot of them are only available in Japan.
Oh, okay.
To be, if some of them are available here in the States, I'm not entirely sure. But I think, far as like the mobile ones, I think most of them are strictly only within Japan.
Aw. So you like so they didn't, you know, dub anything. Like they didn't like.
I mean,
That's weird.
maybe you could
That's.
play them. Maybe you could play them, but maybe they wouldn't be dubbed or translated. Maybe they would
Oh man.
still be in Japanese. But then I could be wrong. I'm not entirely sure. Uh, I'm sure after just doing just like a little bit of research, I'm pretty sure you can find some that are in English.
Or subbed.
Yeah.
Like I'll play a sub.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, okay, so I found one.
Oh.
So there is one, Memory Defrag, which is it came out in 2016, and it is available in English. It has
Hmm.
elements from the anime as well as like original story stuff that's non-related. So that's pretty cool.
Hmm. That's funny though because usually, well, I wouldn't say all of them are like related to the show, but like some of them are, especially when it comes to anime. Some of them, where
Hmm.
they'll give you like a hint of the character. I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
So that is kind of
Because
funny to me.
I remember seeing some in some of the games where they would either like maybe redesign the character, maybe give him some new armor or weapons that aren't in the show, or they would just have their own character, like the completely character created specifically for the original character, specifically for the game.
Right.
Like they're not in the manga or in the show, but they decided, hey, let's have fun with it, where they're able to actually create like a new character,
Nice. Hmm.
and it would just be considered non-canon.
Wow. I'll have to check that out now. I'm
Yeah.
interested. Especially like an anime about a game
Yeah.
being a
Yeah,
game.
yeah. It's a game. It's a video game. It's an anime that's about a video game. Then eventually they create a video game that's based off of the video game anime.
Wow.
So it's kind of like looping over itself. It's like it's created itself already. It's like kind of
Exactly.
similar, yeah, similar to like the South Park where they're playing a game in the show. So it's like, yeah, we'll just take elements from that we made from the show with the kids playing, and we'll kind of incorporate that into the storyline. So
Right.
it's just pulling stuff from itself. So
Pretty much.
yeah,
Well,
and I know it's
hmm?
kind of unrelated, but one thing that's actually kind of cool with the franchise is that there's actually been a board game.
A board game?
Yeah, there was.
Wow.
It's only been released in Japan and Chinese, or Japanese and Chinese. An English version isn't available, but it's still kind of neat to see like they've actually somehow were able to add board game mechanics or kind of translate it into a board game.
But a
'Cause,
board game.
well, I mean, in game design they always recommend that you turn your video game into a board game or try and play through it your mechanics in real time. You kind of create things with level design, you kind of build it and see how it works, or you try and create a way of playing your game through with similar mechanics and see if they make sense or if they work. Try and get a playthrough before you actually commit anything to digital or whatever. But in game design, that's something that you do. So, so
Right. Wow.
it's definitely something that's has a lot of content. And for a show that's about a video game, there's actually been a lot of video game contents that have been created, even though not all of it's available in English. It's still something that's still pretty popular in Japan.
I bet all the either the anime itself or the game itself or the board game
Yeah,
itself.
yeah, and the literature. So yeah.
Wow. Well then. Well, I think that's gonna be it, Joe.
Yeah. I think that's all we have time for today. Thank you, everyone, for stopping by the animation station and listening to the podcast wherever you are, whether if you're falling asleep, need some help listening to us, or falling asleep, or if you're at the gym or on your drive home, or just walking around the beach or wherever you are. Thank you for listening.
Yes, thank you so much. We really appreciate it and can't wait for you guys to hear us next time. This has been Animation Station. My name is Teosha Charles and this is Joseph. And nice, can't wait to hear you guys again. We'll see you guys again. Bye bye.
Bye.
Hey guys, it's Teosha Charles here from Animation Station. Just wanted to talk to you guys about our wonderful company, Elite 23 Global. This is a creative place for creative minds. We have a wonderful board of branches, which is fashion, media, and even gaming. We have a team of creative minds coming together to make projects we always wanted to start, like this one. Also, come check out our clothing store called Elite 23 Shopping to check out the hottest and even cutest styles. If you want something new, come to Elite 23 Shopping. See you guys later. Bye!